10 days ago, the World Championships in Anaheim, California concluded. Cradily, Lapras, and Dusclops were meta staples, but picks like Galarian Moltres, Shadow Kanto Marowak, and Tinkaton set themselves apart. There were plenty of meta surprises too, like Senhudigo's Turtonator and Toadscroll combo, Lao Jeff's III's Shadow Dusknoir, and Dun Dun Batus's Dragapult. After 2 days of extremely hard-fought battles, only Spain's Pokémon and India's Beelzebub remained. These two trainers were destined to meet on Championship Sunday in the arena for the very first time. On a Sunday morning, unlike any other, the soft California summer breeze hummed with the roar of the crowd. As the palm trees swayed and Pokemon fans took their seats, Pokémon and Beelzebub clashed on center stage. What unfolded next was one of the best sets of competitive Pokemon ever played. In today's episode, we'll be recapping the World Championships, starting with the overall meta, then player storylines, bracket breakdowns, and a Grand Finals recap, as well as the evolution that competitive Pokemon underwent this year. We've got a ton to talk about, so if you're ready, lock in, good luck, and have fun. Welcome back, trainers, to another episode of the Show 6 podcast. I am your co-host, Speedies Chief 2, with my host, ZZ Wireless. I'm very excited to get into this Worlds recap, ZZ. We did an awesome Worlds preview, and we're actually going to tally up our scores on how we did with those players. But yeah, let's check in, see how you're doing, how you're adjusting to the jet lag and the time difference, and how you're feeling.
Well, as you mentioned, Speedy, it's been 10 days. I am feeling better. The 9-hour time difference is difficult for a Central European, but I'm back to work, back to regular life stuff. And yeah,
Awesome.
It's been a while since Worlds wrapped up, and sad life stuff got a little in the way of an earlier recording. But I feel like we're still in time. The new season hasn't even started yet. We're still within the old meta, where no more tournaments will be played in. And yeah, it's like this little in-between cycle, like a little bit looking back at what was and what could have been, and because I did compete at Worlds as well, and it did not go my way all the way, but still happy with my run, and definitely it was very exciting to enter the arena as a spectator as well, to see the stage design, to see the competitors. And even though it was a tournament of a lot of upsets, I feel as if Pokémon as the most accomplished European competitor of the season, and Beelzebub as last year's 4th place finisher and one of the strongest Indian battlers. Like that was definitely a showdown for the ages. And as you mentioned, like I don't think we've seen anything this exciting in a World's Grand Final since Dancing Rob reset the bracket to become our very first Master Division World Champion in 2022.
Exactly. I've seen a lot of discussion about that. I think that our past grand finals were cursed by the 3-1 result, right? We'd have just a 3-1 victory for either side. But this game 5, it just hits different. And I was talking with my my co-casters after that. They all agreed the game 5 is just such a hype moment, especially in the bracket reset. But you made so many good points. I'm going to try to kind of rifle through them really quickly. People need to respect Asia. I'm just telling you this. Yakai last year, Beelzebub this year. These trainers only get one chance really to qualify for the World Championships through whatever qualifying tournament they have, but they always show up. I mean, this is honestly insane. I know that VG has a pattern where every odd year a trainer from Japan, I believe, is able to win. And I think Go is starting to have a similar trend where we have a trainer from Asia that just crushes.
Go's current pattern is just every year a trainer from Asia wins. It's only been 2 years, but still, it's been quite impressive, I must say. And I think because like we dabble in like player storylines, trying to assess the power level of the global scene. And I think if we like talk about who's the current best player in the world, that always has to come with an asterisk if we talk about that like during a season, in the middle of a season, because we just like 1/4 of the global Go population just doesn't get the spotlight essentially. But like we've seen it with Beelzeboy, we've seen it with Yakai, we've also seen it with a bunch of other competitors like Master Me here, also from India, also with
Yes.
a top 8 finish. There's such depth of talent, not only in like the Pokemon country of Japan, but also places like Hong Kong, also places like India. And
Hmm.
yeah, definitely I think we are trying to do our best to put those trainers on the map to give them the recognition they deserve.
Hmm.
But we can only ever do so much with so few tournaments that they do get to compete in. And yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Also, there's
Worlds
a lot to
definitely
be
showed
said.
what we can do.
Exactly. And there's a lot to be said about the double elimination format as well. It can be very, very unforgiving. Whereas, I would say during the regular season, if you're running Swiss, it makes more sense because then you essentially you move into situations where you can start 0-2 and you can still make day two. You can still make top cut or whatever it might be. And Worlds is probably the gray area for that argument. Double elimination might just be fine at Worlds because I don't think we're going to have a world champion with two losses on their record, no matter what, just because of how stacked the competition is. But to taking a look over at socials, so many interesting things happening before and after the event. I wanted to point out your bell curves that you were posting about King Gambit. Those are killing
uh,
me. Those are so funny.
it's becoming a tradition. Like it started with Shadow Gyarados last year. Now I managed to qualify again, and I so like this is something that I've talked about with Tomahawk briefly because he was kind of
Mm.
disappointed in me. He was like
Oh.
looking at me and like going like, you know, you're one of the best players in the world. Why are you bringing an RPS pick rather than a Pokemon that gives you neutral play? But I think I still don't regret bringing King Gambit, even though its main purpose is to RPS certain core meta picks like Credilli, like Ghost types, just
Yeah.
because I did not have the practice results or the practice experience with the neutral picks to
Mhm.
justify running a team that wasn't what I did wrong. I feel as if,
Mm.
like, if I am currently not feeling the meta in a way that I would consider myself competitive, may as well opt into the one thing that I will always have going for me, which is familiarity with crazy shit. Um, so I don't know whether we have to beep that. But this is just something that I tend to do, and I feel as if
Yeah.
like I earned the right to do something crazy like that.
Yes.
And like it's still a top 32, so nobody can tell me that Kingambit didn't work. It's a top 32 at Worlds. A lot of people would be very proud of that.
Exactly. No, honestly, I speak for most viewers, most Pokemon Go competitive fans. Please don't change ZZ. Please don't go vanilla ice cream on us and just play a Azumarill Shadow Drapion every event. Please don't do that. But no, I think there were so many interesting picks, and your King Gambit, I would classify it in the same kind of grouping as Sanhudigo's Turtonator, as in Pokemon that were solid but ended up getting buffs right at the end of the season, or excuse me, going into the next season, because in the Tales of Transformation that's starting next month, both of those Pokemon are getting upgrades to Metal Sound for King Gambit, and then
I
with
think Metal Sound is actually not even getting buffed. It's going to be distributed to Empoleon and Kommo, but I think it's staying the
ah
same in terms of its parameters.
thank you. I'm wondering why Metal Sound Empoleon is so high in the PV Poke rankings. Then that confuses me.
I
But
think it's just
anyways,
because, like, you remember Shadow for Alligator, right? Like, that thing was
yeah.
a menace. Imagine that with a steel typing and a cheaper
Mm,
anti grass coverage move. So
mm,
I feel as if, even with the current parameters, Shadow Empoleon is probably going to do great. But if anybody listening right now, please stay here first and foremost. But if anybody's expecting a big breakdown of the Tales of Transformation meta, that is coming. It is not coming
yes.
today because we want to
Yes.
dedicate today's episode entirely to the world's competitors and their stories. Whereas we will probably wait until the actual energy values for the new season drop or to discuss what will change.
Exactly. Small changes in energy values, like 5 energy more or less for a certain charge attack, it can send a Pokemon up or down the rankings 50 or 100 slots. So it really, really depends on what the final numbers are. And we don't know that until the season actually rolls out. So to ZZ's point, we fully anticipate we'll do a breakdown of that, especially leading into the Frankfurt and Monterey regionals that are coming up. So definitely follow the podcast if you want to hear that, because we will be giving our best possible advice. But this kind of segues into the first thing we were going to break down. We won't spend too much time on this because, to your point, this meta is basically done, or we're going to see a brand new meta roll out. But I did want to point out something that I mentioned in the intro. We had a lot of expected picks, Dusclops, Cradily. These Pokemon were really strong. But then we had other things that kind of outclassed other Pokemon in their categories, mainly Galarian Moltres outclassing Mandibuzz, Tinkaton seemingly outclassing Azumarill, and Dedenne, I guess, on Fraud Watch at this point in the meta. And then you had other Pokemon like Fortress popping up. I think we had almost an even split in Top Cut between Shadow Scizor and Fortress, maybe a few more Shadow Scizor, but the Bug Steels were really like a 60-40 kind of dynamic from what I could see. I just want to ask you, because you were prepping, you were reviewing teams. I was more kind of looking at this from a bird's eye view. What was your read on this? Because if I could take one thing away from the meta and how it actually shook out, another example, Shadow Kanto Marowak over Diggersby, right? If I could take one thing away, I would say that the Cano Cult tournaments were absolutely invaluable. I think that if you were competing in those tournaments, you saw these changes before almost anyone else. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I 100% agree. I think those trends were really just about spot on, actually. And
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like Dedenne being on Fraud Watch, while I do agree, I think that even we only saw like four Dedenne in top 32, it still really shaped this meta because Dedenne is a Pokemon that, as we mentioned in our preview, you cannot go weak to. If you go weak
Yes.
to Dedenne too much, it will just run over you. And that's why the top two most used Pokemon in the world's top cut were Cradily at 78.1% and Shadow Kanto Marowak at 43.8%. Those
Mhm.
are essentially the two hardest answers and also like the two archetypes of Dedenne answers that you can have. And
Exactly.
those top the usage. So it makes a lot of sense why Dedenne didn't do better because essentially everybody was prepping for it. And
Mhm.
I think people will have to keep prepping for it for as long as Dedenne stays good, because once somebody brings that mouse and runs into people that disregard this big threat, it's going to get ugly. So
Yes.
that way, Dedenne had an influence without actually doing anything itself. Um, but there were like interesting aspects that you also mentioned in terms of okay, these Pokemon compete for a role, and how do they
Mhm.
do that, and who comes out on top? Um, One interesting development: Galarian Moltres over Mandibuzz. Why is that so? What does Mandibuzz do? Mandibuzz is a fantastic response to Shadow Drapion. With Air Slash, you just neutrally outbulk. You can take like 5 Aqua Tails.
Mhm.
You have a very good matchup there. Shadow Drapion was not in the top 12 for a day 2 usage. And I think with how prevalent Kanto Marowak was, with how Tinkaton's usage did rise, it makes a lot of sense why Shadow Drapion wasn't really anywhere to be seen.
Mhm.
And another thing that we see when we look at the top usage is that the presence of ghost types made Annihilate pretty uncommon. I feel as if
Yes.
people did underexplore the karate choppers like Pangoro and Primeape. Those just didn't show up even though they had good play on paper. But like those fighting type Pokemon are also some that give Mandibuzz an edge over Galarian Moltres typically.
Mhm.
If we remember the day one usage, Mandibuzz was actually on more teams than Galarian Moltres. It just didn't
Mhm.
perform as well, so it didn't translate to day two. Galarian Moltres ended up being the better choice for what we did actually see. And that was a Pokemon like Cradily, where you are absolutely helpless if you are a Mandibuzz,
Mhm.
whereas you can actually play out that matchup as a Galarian Moltres, and we did see that in the grand finals a good amount of times. Even
Yep.
though Cradily technically wins that, you can still dip in and out of that matchup and have a lot of play. And also another thing that Galarian Moltres does, which Mandibuzz doesn't do as well, is to really hard check those ghost types.
Mm.
The ghost types were also like actually a really competitive category because we did see Dusclops emerge as the premier ghost types from NAIC,
Mhm.
really giving a lot of safe play into Pokemon like Diggersby, which would be a hard wall to Galarian Corsola. But this is just ripple effect after ripple effect after ripple effect because Credilli is stable, the most common Pokemon uh, to reign in Dedenne. That in turn means that Diggersby, as a ground type that uses quick attack, has very poor matchup against the rock and grass type Credilli, whereas
Mhm.
Kanto Marowak, as just a ground type attacker that does neutral damage into Credilli, can
Mhm.
even force the two shield scenario in some cases if the Credilli is on acid, for example. So it would make a lot more sense to move away from Diggersby, and in turn, you are free to use Galarian Corsola more often, which just has a lot more immediate fast attack pressure and just feels like a little bit less of a sitting duck in many situations if you compare it
Mhm.
to Dusclops, which was still viable but fell
Mhm.
behind Galarian Corsola. And that way, those Pokemon and their relationships between each other essentially ended up informing the meta that we ended up seeing. And I think if you just followed along with the usage trends in the Kanto cult, that was relatively clear to you beforehand. So
Mhm.
either practicing or keeping an eye on the practice data really helped a lot of people prepare.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, in order to kind of protect and preserve a lot of the team ideas and structures in the Candle Cult. Martine only publishes the winning teams, right? So you're not, if you have 48 people competing or 60 people competing, which some of those tournaments did get pretty big, you're not going to see all 60 teams. So whereas there is significant value from looking at the results, I do think that actually being in the competition is also really, really good. I mean, I think 2 or 3 of the tournaments. I played Ashton Ash, I played Dialab, I played Jacko Loco, I played Gamebird, trainers literally from multiple regions, and I got to see their teams. And I was hearing from them because I played a team that Out of Pocket gave to me. He said, you should try this if you want to beat Dedenne without playing Dedenne. I recommend this team. And I that team was really solid. And for example, after playing Ashton Ash and Dialab, they said, "Yeah, I'm just so weak to Shadow Kanto Marowak. I just don't know how to deal with it. I need to change my team." And I think that that kind of information, getting that weeks before Worlds, is super, super invaluable to a lot of these trainers. So yeah, shout out to the Candle Cult and the incredible work they do over there and all the tournament hosts. Something interesting I wanted to talk with you about specifically. I noticed this on Beelzeboy and Harjeff's teams in particular. And you mentioned earlier ghost types, Shadow Annihilate. You mentioned Galarian Corsola and Dusclops trying to shut down Shadow Annihilate, which did kind of feel like an anti-meta pick, especially for Pokemon like Cradily, like Lapras, like the Diggersby, whatever else would be weak to counter. Something interesting I noted was that if you look back at NAIC, I basically saw every time there was an Annihilate. That was definitely hard to pronounce. Every time there was an Annihilate, we saw a Dedenne paired with it because it was kind of like this A-B duo that hard checked Mandibuzz, at least on one side, with of course Dedenne. What I noticed here is that there was kind of a tech in order to support the Shadow Annihilate on both Beelzeboy and Harjeff's teams. We did get a fairy type, but it wasn't Dedenne. It was Azumarill for Harjeff, and it was Tinkaton for Beelzeboy. And then we got a soft answer to something like a Mandibuzz in the form of Thunderfang Steelix. We got that both on Harjeff's team and Beelzeboy's team. So I think it's so fascinating to kind of evolve, no pun intended, from an A B duo that one of them hard checks Mandibuzz, the other one hard loses. And then you have this kind of like supporting cast where you're just like, okay, I'm going to bring in a fairy type, but also I'm going to have a soft answer in Shadow Steelix. And for me, in my caster predictions, I felt like Shadow Steelix is one of the biggest surprises in this meta. And I think that the Dark Flyers was a big part of that. The return of Azumarill was a big part of that. The water types that we are going to see, like Lapras and Lyle Jeffs for Alligator, apparently, is also part of that. Did you see Shadow Steelix coming, and do you agree with this tech of supporting Shadow Annihilate with a hard answer and a soft answer to Dark Flyers and things like that?
So actually, I would say that. So first of all, I did see Steelix coming, I was considering it myself, but I don't
Mm,
have a good one. If I had, like, if Onyx wasn't grunts, I would have grinded the event to maybe build a better Shadow Steelix. So that was just like an accessibility issue for me.
hmm
But in Battle Frontier, our Great League players used Shadow Steelix a good amount this last cycle and to great effect. So I was definitely considering Shadow Steelix as a threat going into it. I didn't
mm,
expect it to win it all and take another trophy, just because the raw numbers were still pretty low. Not a lot of people were opting for it in practice, so I
hmm
wasn't like really thinking about a Shadow Steelix World Champion. But it does make a lot of sense because it does typically um, have good play into essentially everything that isn't a ground type or a counter user.
hmm
So especially with the crunch tag, you're really good into ghosts. You even beat Talonflame, which as a fire type you would think is a decent enough check. You beat that in the 1 and 2 shield scenario, even if Flame Charge is being used.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like you have play into waters. You're not as miserable as you may think you are into a Pokemon like Credilli, and you're just
hmm
very good into Dark Flyers, especially Mandibuzz. So, oh yeah, another important thing is also because we did mention Scizor and Dedenne as two things that you want to be prepared for. Steelix covers both of these, so that's also why Steelix has very nice roll compression. And yeah, like the question about Shadow Annihilate, personally, I feel as if the thing that you want to do with a Pokemon like that is to scare away ghost types first and foremost. Because
hmm
even
Agree.
though like if you farm up energy, you may be able to do stuff. If you have your Annihilate on a Galarian Corsola, and the Galarian Corsola has just one shield, you're in for a bad time. So I figured that with ghosts being such staples, people would opt to pair their Annihilate with things that really hard answer ghost types.
hmm
Rajev did have the Manibus, which I do consider a soft answer. He did have he did have a lot of neutral answers and the Steelix as well. And then we also did see the Beelzebub team where he does have, I think, arguably the star of the show with Galarian Moltres, where the Sucker
Yes.
Punches really put in a lot of work. And
Yeah.
between his very first streamed match, where he did lead a Galarian Moltres into a Tinkaton, just to flip the matchup without even having to flip alignment, just doing enough damage with perfect Moltres farm against the Tinkaton and a lot of Brave Birding. And like lastly, the grand finals where the Galarian Moltres was unchecked. I feel as if that Pokemon was really the key to victory here.
I agree with you. If you're watching the YouTube version, ZZ did send me the clip that he was referencing there. So you will be able to actually see that battle. I'm going to insert that into our YouTube video. So make sure to follow that channel as well and look for the updates if you have time to watch the YouTube version. I know some people are driving. If you're driving, please don't watch the YouTube version. We don't want to be sued for liability. But yeah, you make some really interesting points. I definitely think that the adjustment, and we'll get to the grand finals soon, but the adjustment that Beelzebub made between his first meeting with Patoman, trying to just hammer the Annihilate, bringing it over and over, and getting basically caught against Galarian Corsola, the adjustment he made for Sunday, only bringing it to one game the entire championship Sunday, including the grand finals and grand finals reset, that was key. I feel like that was a massive, massive adjustment he made. That was really, really clever. And it was for the exact reason you mentioned. Galarian Corsola is just such a menace, especially to something like the Shadow Annihilate. So there are some polarizing matchups, but I feel like the best players were on stage on Sunday and they were able to pilot themselves through those situations. In terms of overall meta, we talked about Shadow Scizor, we talked about Steelix, we talked about Dedenne, Shadow Annihilate, Shadow Kanto Marowak as well. I'm not sure if there are any other Pokemon you want to point out. It feels like it was poetic yet again for Cradilly to be overwhelmingly top usage, but not win the event. And also, it was definitely cathartic for Morita Pokemon, my wonderful wife, for Lapras to win the grand finals. Either way, we were going to get a Lapras world champion,
Yeah,
which I know
yeah,
she was
yeah.
happy about.
I think like I'm happy about Lapras, not only because
Yeah,
it's also a favorite of mine, maybe not to that exact same degree, but
yeah.
I love when the Pokemon that are winning the event are ones that provide neutral play rather than polarizing play. And I think Lapras is like one of the great equalizers when it comes to, okay, what can I just slap onto any team and I will have play. I may not dominate, I may be caught out of position if my opponent really plays it well, but I will have play. And I think especially like high level players like Pato and Beelzeboy were able to showcase the intricacies of Lapras really, really well. Be it like a scenario where Beelzeboy um gets met with a Lapras safe swap from
Mm.
Pato. He
Mhm.
does like 6 sucker punches and then brings in his own Lapras to sponge all the energy and bank the energy on his Moltres before dipping out. Like that's a high level play that really helped him in the end game there. I have like a lot of notes for the grand finals. We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
me too. Me
Um,
too. Yeah.
but
I want to talk.
also
Go ahead. Go ahead.
like this is also like another Bills boy thing, knowing when to throw the ice beam and when to throw the sparkling aria, because sometimes you just need this little extra bit of damage, and this is just like it can make the difference between reaching a last move and not reaching a last move, whether you want to expend the sparkling aria energy twice or whether you just go for one ice beam.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like Lapra is just so flexible, bulky enough to really dip in and out of matchups, great coverage, and not OP either. Like it's not as if the game is over if the Lapras is ever on anything. It just really gives you a lot of wiggle room, a lot of pivoting potential in and out of matchups.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. That kind of decision making in the moment, for me, that looks like hundreds and hundreds of games played, knowing your damage calculations inside and out, knowing your shielding scenarios, maybe hundreds of hours on PvPoke as well, looking at damage percentages. Or it could just be a really, really brilliant player who just absorbs everything the first time they see it. Sometimes I do wish I had more of I had better memory retention, maybe photographic memory, where I can hit an ice beam one time and I can just remember from then on how much damage it does in whatever matchup. But that's why these players are the best. In terms of meta, I guess we can wrap up with a few of the outliers, a few of the spice picks, and talk about those before we get into the meat of the player storylines. I was a Shadow Dusknoir hater all weekend. I was basically saying I don't understand how it's doing anything in this meta, but then Lyle Jeffs took it all the way to fifth place overall. I don't know if you have thoughts on Shadow Dusknoir, but it seemed like the least popular ghost type for a reason.
I think like the fact that it made top cut on multiple teams is honestly just testament to how underrated it was going into this. The person who popularized it, like unwillingly to a degree, didn't even make top cut. That was 315 Katunari from
Mm.
Japan. They excelled in practice tournaments. Like if you look at those chemical graphics, they're on there like 3 or 4 times because they just kept winning tournaments. But then the secret was out, and more people were experimenting with the Dusk Noir.
Mm.
And if you opt for that, that gives you just different play than the regular Dusclops or Corsola. And that all
Mm.
of a sudden your Ghost isn't the safe pivot that you bring in if you want a neutral matchup. It's an aggressive two-shield fast move beatdown machine.
Yes.
And those Shadow Astonishes chunk. The pacing to Shadow Punch is excellent. Dynamic Punch is great coverage. And you will have to be careful of those like dark flyers that stand in your way. There are counters to that Pokemon, but if you don't build your team with the Shadow Dusknoir in mind, you may just be in trouble because this is so much more aggressive and can win a game on its own, whereas the other ghosts are more about setting up your teammates.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if people will get this, but to me, it's almost like if you had an Annihilate and you injected it with Venom, like in Batman's Bane, then you would get Shadow Dust Noir, just something totally berserk, lots of damage output, and the dynamic punch gives you that fighting type coverage against Cradilla, against Lapras, against Diggersby, a lot of these other targets that typically you don't get in other ways. So I think it required a very specific style of team building to support that Shadow Dust Noir. And even in matchups like when Lyle Jeffs would bring it, I think I forget exactly who he played against. Maybe it was Trent who had the Shadow Drapion, and Lyle still brought that Shadow Dust Noir, and the casters were like shocked. They're like, "Oh my gosh!" Even in spite of this, he's doubling down on the Pokemon. So again, I can't emphasize enough. It really depends on what you're comfortable bringing and what your play style is. You shouldn't force yourself into playing any kind of high finesse team unless it fits your personality and fits your approach.
Yeah.
It was really funny. You mentioned Shadow Steelix taking down Talonflame. We did a real awesome skit. I'll try to insert it here at the 29-minute timestamp. We did an awesome skit called Sharpedo Tank, in which we brought in Arrow and Tauntaun and Richie, and we had them pitch their teams. And myself, Rocha, and Butters were kind of like the sharks, right? We're choosing who we're going to invest in, which team we think is going to go all the way, that kind of thing. And Arrow told us, he said Shadow Steelix can beat Talonflame in the ones and the twos with even with Flame Charge, it can win those matchups. And when he told me that, not looking at the Sims, I was like, Arrow, I'm sorry, but I'm out. I'm not in this deal. I just don't believe you. You've got double steal, and you're going to take on Talonflame. I think you're screwed, more or less. And then Tauntaun came on, and he said, I'm going to play a Pokemon that actually top cut already in EU. It's an Astonished user. That's a Dragon type. And I was like,
Fourth place,
no,
Gdansk.
no effing way you're going to play Dragapult in this tournament. And he did, which, this
Yeah.
segues from our Astonished user debate. 13th overall, Tauntaun Batu's Dragapult. That was also insane.
Yeah, like if anyone can do it, it's Tauntaun. Like this guy is
Yeah.
just like EU is a spicy region, and
Mm,
he is the spiciest EU player. So like even I'm trying to come for his title eventually, but
yeah.
he won a tournament with an Alolan Raticate earlier this season. Like
Yeah.
that's the type of player he is, and I think he just feels uncomfortable if he doesn't have a Pokemon like that on his team. Like the more meta he goes, the worse he performs. So I really appreciate him leaning into that Dragapult. It is very squishy. That way he like it kind of imitates the way a Pokemon like Shadow Dusknoir plays, where you have
Mm-hmm.
the 4-3 pacing to your 35 energy move. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have the most bulk, but where Dragapult stands out is with its ability to, for example, resist the incinerate pressure from a Talonflame,
Yes.
and just like a lot of good resistances come with being a Dragon type.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I did enjoy that pick a lot, even though I personally was a little doubtful going into it whether that could work. But yeah, he did
Yeah.
make it work.
Yeah, exactly. And with this new season, I mean, dragons might get even better pretty soon. So we're going to have to
Yeah.
see. I'm not sure if there are any teams that you wanted to point out. The last note that I had was Axon basically recycling his NAIC team and not changing a thing and coming into this meta, which is not something at all that I predicted.
Yeah, like Axon is like definitely back first and foremost. Like we were
Mm,
thinking like, oh, is he going to take the triple crown back to back to back? That would have been probably like asking too much, but he did mention that he didn't even like the meta. That's nice if you don't like the meta and still win NAIC.
true.
And he just ran it back because I guess comfort picks, I guess like never change a winning team and still made it to top 32. So shout outs to him. I don't believe that like most of his team really aged well, but I guess sometimes it's just the driver, not the car. So that
Yeah.
was still a really good run. Like one thing that I want to point out too
Hmm.
is actually the highest placing American in the tournament, which is Firestar 73. The star of the show was truly a fire type, as Shadow Typhlosion made it all the way to top 8, which is a very interesting core breaker, and that is it is a fire type that has very strong play into like a water type like Lapras,
Hmm.
but also it wins the head to head in the fire mirror against Talonflame because Thunder Punch paces faster and just like in the ones and twos just knocks out. Very strong against the steel bugs, obviously. And honestly, nothing wants to take a Shadow Blast burn. If you manage to set this up, if you manage to farm some energy somewhere, like you can even one shot an unfortunate Kanto Marowak. So
Hmm.
they're definitely one of the more exciting um, picks in Top Cut, and also a fantastic result for Firestar, who like
Yeah.
there's a lot of very prominent and accomplished American Championship Series contenders, and
Hmm.
a lot of trainers that may have not really met their own expectations at this tournament. Whereas Firestar is somebody who doesn't attend as many events, still doing well at them, but kind of looking for a breakout performance still, one that matches his GBR accolades, which are
Mhm.
plentiful. But I think it was his first top eight, and making that at the World Championships is honestly just the best place to do so.
Exactly. Firestar was very impressive. I think we saw him in the Spice Bowl, hosted by myself and Home Size Henry. He was actually very good in that one too. If I recall, he was playing Shadow Mightyena, if I'm not mistaken. So, guy knows what he's doing when it comes to spicy Pokemon.
Oh, second top eight actually, yeah. But the first was just like Charlotte 2023. I feel as if
Yeah.
both the stage has gotten bigger for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm looking at his record as well. Ninth in Atlanta is also impressive. That was recent. He did it with Corviknight, which is pretty sick. So definitely on the up and coming,
Yeah.
especially when you look at his NAIC 2024 results, right, where he basically was a blip on the radar going 1-2. So
I want to
he's
point out one stat now that I look at the Dracovish profile,
uh
and that's matches won. Because sometimes it's not just about your final placement, but also about how many rounds did you go through to arrive where you did arrive. And that's 8 matches won in Atlanta, 8 matches won at NAIC, and 9 matches won at Worlds. And that's tournament winner levels. Like
yes.
maybe dropping down into losers a little too early at times, but the losers runs he goes on are almost unparalleled because that's just crazy numbers.
Yeah, I mean he is the basement bully. I don't know if there are any other funny ways we can say it. I think that one of our casters pointed out that Firestar lives in the losers bracket. I don't think that was very endearing. I would say he
Oh man.
dwells. He dwells in the losers bracket is something that maybe is a bit more appropriate. But yeah, if he stops dropping the earlier rounds in round 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it might be, if he just is able to take that 8-0 run or the 7-0 run and just do it from the winner's side, he's winning events. Like
Yeah.
it's spontaneous at that point. So, and if you look at his record as well, this actually segues perfectly because I wanted to highlight two different regions. The first one was actually NA, and the first player I wanted to highlight was Firestar. So
There we go.
same mind. Day one, Firestar had wins over the Ox 5005. The Ox had Talonflame and Pangoro on their team, which is pretty cool. He then took on Haydonis Actual with Blastoise, Fortress, and Talonflame. Holy talk about Typhlosion targets, right? If you have Thunder Punch and Incinerate, that was a plentiful feast. He lost to Trent, sending him down to the loser's bracket. So basically, round three of the winner's side, he was set down. He capped out his day one with 5 more wins over Anacor, Ingbeto, Javier V20, Zardy, and Wolfpack, who actually won a pretty intense set on stream. Day two, he would take wins over Pokemichi and Ice Chris. So Firestar is literally disposing of people in that loser side bracket. I mean, he is dumpstering people with his gameplay, and then he would eventually lose to LNDS Corlash. So it seriously took a top 4 trainer in Corlash to take down Firestar, which
Yeah.
you can say you can look at the record and say he finished 7th overall, but seriously, he played insanely well, beating
Yeah.
trainers from all kinds of different regions.
I think he took down 4 people that have a championship winning jersey in game. So if you can take down 4 event winners, then you can win an event for sure.
Absolutely, and I think it's so ironic. I'm going to throw this meme up on screen for all of our YouTube audience as well. But Dialap posted a really funny meme about carrying. I don't know if you've seen this yet. Let me see.
I
I'll
may
send
have
you the
not.
link.
I will check for it.
I'm gonna get your real reaction. I'm gonna send it to you in Discord right now. So
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah.
he's
I
got
got it. Oh
he's got
man.
carrying EU. It's a picture of Pata Man just smoldering like he always does in his photos. Carrying Asia, Beelzebub with his world champion trophy. Carrying Latam, you've got Harjef and Corlash, which obviously are two of Brazil's best. And then carrying NA is just a Boeing 747, which is just the funniest thing.
Oh man. Like
Which is
it's
just
back
the
to back
funniest
worlds
thing.
without an NA trainer in top four. Like what's even happening?
We used up all of our luck in Yokohama. All right, top 3 NA in
Yeah.
Yokohama. We used it up for a generation, I guess.
Oh.
But Yeah, this meme is hilarious, and it's so funny as well when you consider that we did have Lyle from Canada in top five, and then we had Firestar at seventh overall from North America. So it wasn't the usual suspects. It wasn't the Pocket. It wasn't the Elam. It wasn't the Dune Bug or the Rise that you typically expect. But yeah, NA still has some gems, I would say, and we are still a very dense region. It just feels
Definitely.
like at Worlds we just can't compete.
I think like it's still such a small sample size. It's two
Yeah,
tournaments. You just need to get your together the next time, and it's
true,
all
true.
going to work out. One thing, like while we're
Thanks.
on the topic of American trainers, is that I feel as if some of the top cutters that you did have, like the few that you did have, are
Oh,
actually
thanks.
actually like trainers that if we look back at our preview, I don't even think we mentioned them, but
Nope.
they would be like a little bit on the like bouncing back from previous results type of trainers where you have
Yeah.
Magic Mason, who obviously is one of the best but not really one of the most featured trainers in recent years. I feel like he was really big in like 2023 where
Yes.
he was up there with the Rises and Doombugs. Then just calmed down a little bit, maybe also didn't attend all that many events, but
Mm.
now back strong with a ninth place finish. um, Trent, who is somebody who I think publicly was like wondering about retirement already. Too good to
Yes.
retire. Too good to retire. You have to keep
Too
at it.
good.
I'm so sorry. But that was a fantastic run to top 16.
Yeah.
And also players like Arrow, who took me down. Um,
Hmm.
Players like JJan, same top 17 placement. Like those are trainers that like had their moments in the past, but maybe weren't as expected to do super well at this tournament if you compare them to the Pockets, to the Nighttime Clashes, to the Dreambugs, to the Rises.
Hmm.
So Elam as well, like those were the trainers that dominated the North American circuit during the regular season, but I guess Worlds is a different beast, and it also just
Hmm.
goes to show how deep the pool of talent is and how small the margins can be at an event like this.
I really appreciate that you pointed out Arrow. I know it's only been 10 days easy. It's probably too soon, but I just got to talk about him a little bit here. So, Arrow started off his day one with wins over Avrip, Flying Pizza, aka the Harjefe Slayer, Master Mihir, and ZZ, right? So, he had four wins. His losses were to Beelzeboy, and then he immediately turned around and lost the rematch to Master Mihir. So, honestly, he lost to the world champ and he lost to Master Mihir, who I believe finished seventh overall. Very, very high finish for him as well. Um,
Yes.
Arrow is one of those trainers that you look at him and you look at his history, creating content, competing in grassroots, competing in regionals, and you say, wait, this guy has not won an event yet? Like, what the hell is going on? This is insane. He's been so close multiple times with, I would argue, his closest one being against Dunebug in San Antonio, going to that bracket reset. That was absolutely heartbreaking. But I would like to see Arrow succeed. And Arrow, if you're listening, I'm sorry that I shot down your Shadow Steelix in the Sharpedo tank. I do think there was some merit to it. And great team reads as well this weekend, man. I told him at the venue. I sent him a DM as well. I said, "Dude, I think your moment is coming," and I really sincerely hope that it does soon because he's worked very hard. So, yeah, I just want to spotlight Arrow there. Sorry, ZZ, but I think he deserves a
It's all
little
good.
shine. Yeah.
I'm certainly not mad at losing to him.
Hmm.
I'm mad that I'm always in his group. I managed to avoid
Yes.
him up until this point, but against somebody who's known for unconventional play, I tend to get in my head a little too much. So I did
Yeah.
have the superior in the back because I expected like a regular player to bring Blastoise in the last game. And then I switched it out for the Talonflame because I thought I'm playing Arrow. And then he had the Blastoise on my Talonflame, but that was not good.
I
It's a
fondly
risky run.
I fondly remember ADL battles where Arrow would make a switch or he would bring something out, and I'm just like, what what are you doing? Like, what does this mean? What do you think that I have in the back? This doesn't make any sense.
Uh,
It's ironic that he pivots from being Arrow to being more standard, and that's the moment when it's like, oh, I wasn't ready for this.
he set up certain expectations, and that may
Exactly.
help him in some situations for sure.
Exactly. Last trainer I wanted to highlight just briefly. We've talked about him a little bit here. I got to interview him on stage, and that was honestly very cathartic as well because that was one of the best moments I've seen Lyle, especially mid competition. If you followed him throughout the seasons, he's always very focused. He's very direct. He's very short because his mind is literally on the next game, on the matchups. He's very very determined to win, and he puts a ton of pressure, an enormous amount of pressure on his own shoulders. Lyle Jeffs had a really, really good run, wins over Desynced, right? He started the day off hot against Desynced. Took on Ventusky, who obviously I have a long running friendship with, Kazim 33, and Pokimichi. Day number two, he was beaten by fellow North American Trent. Then he lost to, or sorry, he won against Trent, excuse me, fellow North American Trent. Then he lost to Pato and Corlash. So if you're going to lose to anyone, it's the EUIC champ and runner-up at Worlds, and Corlash, arguably one of Latam's top trainers right now. So Lyle had an incredible run, and I know he's talking about retirement. He muses over this periodically, every quarter
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, yeah. I feel like that's
But
not the first time this season even.
no, exactly. And to the same point you made about Trent, too good to quit. Sorry, Lyle, but we need you to keep playing, inspiring people, and being an awesome person because we adore you and want you in the community. So hopefully Lyle comes back. If he needs to take a break, that's fine. But I would love to see him compete some more.
100%.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to highlight was India. There was a slight revision that I needed to make, and this is due to something that was brought to my attention by my good friend, my dear friend, Shiny Hunter Ben. So we kept on saying during the tournament that we had two trainers from India that were competing. I know that several trainers have Indian heritage, and maybe they lived there at one point, or maybe their family lives there currently. We mentioned Master Mihir and Beelzeboy, but Shiny Hunter Ben pointed out that uh, Abhinav actually played the first 3 months of the 2025 season in the US, and then he moved back to India, and he had been in India since January. So he had been there for quite a while, and he just recently returned to start university. So I know we were saying only two trainers from India, but you would argue that Abhinav, although he qualified for Worlds via a North American tournament, has spent a majority of his season in India. But I want to mention the other two, Master Mihir and Beelzeboy, just really briefly. Master Mihir started the day off in day one with the winner of a game bird. He beat Abhinav, so also very poetic that he would take on another trader from India. Lost to Arrow, but in the losers bracket, sorry ZZ, it's too soon. He won over Kaifia, Avrip, Danny Booz, Zwilus, and Arrow as well. So he avenged his loss to Arrow. Day two losers bracket, he beat Tauntaun and Trent before Maxi and his immaculate, honestly, just incredible Galarian Moltres plays were able to finally take down Master here. So India's got a great track record. Both of their trainers finishing very, very high. Obviously, one of them being a champion. So we need to watch out for India. They're the real deal.
Yeah. Like, I said it after I met Masami here in a grassroots tournament in March, where I was like, okay, I won this tournament, but my grand finals opponent actually outplayed me. I just had the team comp advantage.
Yep.
Now in Worlds, we had even team comps, and he just still outplayed me. So this time it was a 2-0 to him. But yeah, it was great meeting the guy in person. Very impressive showing, and actually could only be stopped by another trainer with Indian heritage, because Maximilian P actually squarely a UK player, but falls under that category as well if we want to count honorary Indians as well in terms of top performance. But
oh, it's
yeah,
amazing.
I will mostly count him as one of our own in terms of EU talent, because honestly, we talked about it after the Utrecht episode, Maxi should have won that tournament. It was a miscount when he had the tournament winning move ready, and some trainers may have not been able to come back from a moment like that. He comes back with a 5th place finish at Worlds. So that is honestly the best response you can have to a heartbreaking moment like that. And yeah, there were a bunch of EU runs that I loved witnessing over the course of the weekend. There was Jox, who's a good friend of mine as well. We did go out to LA a day or two before the tournament, and he was still looking for his shiny shadow scissor. He was like, okay, can you alert me when there's a Go My Super Bug Pokemon grunt around here? I want a shiny for the event. And the day before the event, he did get the shiny. We don't talk about the IVs, but it powered up to like 4098, and he
Yeah.
was able to run that Shadow Shiny Scizor,
Yeah.
and he managed to get his best tournament placement to date at Worlds with this Pokemon that he wanted so badly. So that was really, really lovely. Eventually eliminated by Maxi.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, like overall, EU with a really, really good showing. Like obviously we have Pato as the standout EU player of the season in the grand finals, but also we just had 11 players in top 32, which is the most out of any region. So if we talk
Yeah.
about, okay, like in terms of depth of quality, EU may be the strongest region. I feel like we made another good case for that. And yeah, with Pato, one thing I do want to say before we maybe move on to the grand finals potentially.
Mm-hmm.
In our last episode, we did talk about, okay, who are the rivals from the various regions. I don't believe that there is a Patoman Zizwilus rivalry at this point. Like,
What?
I need to do more to still call this a rivalry because
Ah, I
that
see.
man just has eclipsed anyone in this region this season. So yeah, for sure, an incredible and like a bittersweet end, but still an incredible end to potentially the only season ever that sees a trainer in 3 day threes. UIC champion, NAIC third place finisher, world's finalist. I don't
Wow.
know whether that will ever be repeated by anybody.
Wow. When you put it that way, that's kind of ludicrous. That's kind of
Yes. And it's
wow.
also ludicrous to claim that you're the rival of somebody like that.
Okay, okay. I'm starting to come around to your point. Yeah, we don't want to just bounce in and say, "Oh yeah, I'm equal." I'm neck and neck with Pata Man.
Exactly.
But this just means this
We're
is the beginning
we're
of your
working on
comeback
it.
arc.
Yeah, 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 we're
Exactly.
working on it. Like I will win an event next season. You heard it here first.
Clip it, everyone. I'm entering the timestamp here. But no, you know what? We are headed into the grand finals here. I think we've highlighted a lot of different stories. There were so many surprises and so many fun players to talk about. Jox was incredible on stage. I think he even gave an interview about the Shadow Scizor, which is really, really funny. Andres was exceptional. There were so many other really good trainers. It's hard to mention everyone. So if you are listening to this and you did compete at Worlds, just know ZZ and I are super, super proud of you. We thought you were awesome. And I thought overall, this skill cap for Worlds, it just continues to rise every single time. I was watching back matches that Inadequance and Tomahawk casted, and there were insane CMP switch ties that I didn't even realize happen on stage because I was backstage working on other things. So it was actually insane. ZZ, why don't we just briefly we'll recap how we did with our predictions, and then we'll go into the grand finals, and we'll head towards a wrap up after we talk about closing ceremonies. How does
Let's
that
do
sound?
it. Yes,
All
yes.
right. So we'll run through this real quick. I know a lot of trainers probably have seen this online. We posted each on our socials, and then I think we have it in the YouTube from the YouTube episode from last preview as well. So heating up, I had Adib Khan, Stud Muffins, and Charming Pori. Did not do too well here. Adib was 0-2, Stud Muffins 2-2, Charming Pori 1-2. Heating up, ZZ had its Axon nickname in Ashtonash. You, of course, struggled with Axon, finishing 6-2 overall. Nickname was 1-2, and Ashnash was 2-2. On the rebound, I had Dunebug, Harjeff, and Rise. Dunebug 1-2, Harjeff 7-2, and Rise 2-2. On the rebound, you had a more balanced output here. Lyle Jeffs finishing 5-2, Out of Pocket 1-2, and Tonton Batu's 5-2. Dark Horse candidates, I was 2-2 all the way. I had Ashtonash, Sceptile, and Richie. So none of my Dark Horses really got out of the stable, I would argue. For you, this was interesting because you picked Boom 20, Master Mihir, and SS Thorn. And two of your three picks actually weren't able to attend Worlds. Your one pick that did attend 9-2 Master Mihir, our Shadow Annihilate mastermind, didn't even bring the Shadow Annihilate, but still absolutely crushed. That's the halfway point. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to weigh in on, or I can just run through the rest of them.
I will just take. Can we say we take the average of each category, so like we can cross
Yes.
out Thorn and Boom for the last one? Okay, we'll take that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. For my champions, I picked up Corlash, Pata Man. Already, you can tell I'm an S tier picker when it comes to the champions. And nickname. Corlash 9-2, Potaman 8-2, and nickname 1-2. From a champions, you had MartoGalde, unfortunately one of our O2 victims. You had Potaman as well with 8-2, and Elam, who finished 4-2, which was actually my world's favorite to win it all. Returning to the WCS category, I had It's Axon at 6-2. Marto was 0-2, and I had PvP David, who actually went 3-2. Return to the WCS, you had Richie, 2-2, Yakai, who went 3-2, and Palasha, who was 5-2. Again, another very, very solid, but kind of quiet run from Palasha, and I'm really excited to see what she does next season. Finally, we have our wild cards. I had Yakai at 3-2, Tauntaun at 5-2, and Nighttime Clasher at 3-2. Nighttime Clasher was actually one of the first victims of Beelzeboy, I believe in round 2, so that was a rough start for him. Wild cards, Katunari, 4-2, Kazim, 4-2, and Mung Mi, which was actually 5-2, which is really impressive for Sejun Park.
Yeah.
So those are your picks there. We agreed on the most improved being Kaifia, and then our world's favorite I just left out of the equation. So I put all the numbers in, and I averaged the wins. So with all of my picks, I had 55 total wins, and with all of your picks, you had 54. And that's even considering that 2 of yours were not categorized. So you averaged 3.375 wins per trainer, and I only averaged 3.05. So I will say, on
I love
average,
that we have 2 metrics and we can decide who is the winner based on which we take. This is so diplomatic.
So diplomatic, right? People have called me the politician before. But no, to be fair, I do think that with your picks, you had the higher winning average at almost 3.4 wins per trainer, which I think is definitely remarkable. So I think you might have won this world's recap.
I'll take it.
Yeah, very good. Very, very well done. That being said, I think it's time to move on to the grand finals. And
oh, yes.
I think we should talk about the battles first, and then we can talk about the venue and closing ceremonies, and then we'll wrap up the show. Because like you said, this is a bit more of a digestible episode. But yeah, I mean, I have my thoughts on the grand finals. I'm curious what you thought.
So I'm going to start us off with talking about the winners finals just briefly, not as a play-by-play, but just as like, this is the pretext to the grand finals, right? Because those trainers met in 4 battles already. And Beelzeboy trusted in the same line each time. It was Annihilate lead, Moltres in the back, and then Steelix. But that didn't really go his way. Like, you would think that he has a little bit of a team comp advantage with how free Moltres seems into Patoman's team. Patoman running the Galarian Corsola, obviously weak to Moltres. The Lapras, which does have play, but may need to bait in the 2 shields because Sparkling Aria and Psywave will not cut it. He has to land the Ice Beam. Then Fortress, which is a little bit of a risky bring. It takes a long time to get to a Rock Tomb. If that connects, great, but it's more of a neutral-ish matchup. Then there's Credilli, where I mentioned earlier that, well, Credilli just in a 1v1 is a decent answer. With shields and energy, Moltres can do stuff there. And then 2 relatively hard wins against the Golai support, which is on Shadowclaw in Patoman's case, which gives it a lot of play against ghost types, which we didn't see on Beelzeboy's team. Oh, we did see the Annihilate. That is technically a ghost type. But I guess, like, honestly, the Fury Katawan can also win that matchup. It's not as much of an edge as it would be against, like, a Galarian Corsola or a Dusclops. And then there is the Kanto Marowak as the last Pokemon. So into at least 3 of them, Moltres has a hard winning matchup, and then it has play into the others. So that is essentially why we will always see Moltres from Beelzeboy. And because the best answers from Patu to that Pokemon are probably Fortress, Lapras, and Credilli, we can see why Beelzeboy was leaning into the Annihilate a decent amount, because 2 of them are weak to counter, and the other is doing double resisted bug bites into the Annihilate. So that core was something that intuitively made sense to Beelzeboy during the winners finals. It did not go his way. How did these trainers adjust? Do you want to start us off, Speedy?
I'm looking at trends here, and I just noticed something pretty remarkable about Championship Sunday. But I think the main point, you and I discussed this before we started recording, is that Beelzebub effectively benched that Shadow Annihilate, just recognizing that it was under so much duress from something like Galarian Corsola, and it was just really struggling to find its openings. Deciding to bench it in favor of Shadow Steelix or in favor of basically, yes, Shadow Steelix was definitely an interesting change. I want to mention as well, I'm noticing this that in all 9 games played in the grand finals, we had a 3-1, and then it went to game 5 in the reset. And every single game, Beelzebub brought Galarian Moltres and Lapras Core. Every single game. Shuffled around the Steelix, brought the Shadow Annihilate one time. And other than that, it was a consistent duo. So I'm curious what your thoughts
Yeah.
are on adjustments because it felt like Potaman was able to strike back only when he was able to overwhelm the Galarian Moltres. And once the bird went down, Beelzebub seemed to run out of gas relatively quickly. And that was like a common theme through a lot of the battles that I watched. But I'm curious if you saw the same thing.
Yes. So before the reset, we actually see Beelzebub trusting the same 3 Pokemon every time, like occasionally switching up the order, whether it's a Steelix lead, which I think happened in the first game, or whether it's a Lapras lead,
Correct.
which happened in the subsequent games. Um, and yeah, in the very first match, we have Pato's Lapras into Steelix, and then there's a Lapras Moltres backline for Beelzebub, a Corsola Marowak backline for Pato. And Pato is immediately in a very tough spot here. Because the he needs to draw out the Moltres, but the Moltres can just farm down either the Corsola or the Kanto Marowak and unleash a ton of damage into the lead Pokemon after it farms his target down.
Correct.
So, like, how do you play this? Like, you have to swap here, but the Corsola doesn't even have a great matchup into Steelix. And, like, at the end of the day, it was, like, a very risky strategy bringing 2 Pokemon in the Corsola and the Marowak that just get demolished by the Moltres, especially because with the Steelix in the front, the Marowak will just not find a target anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the strategy swiftly ended with a 1-0 for Beelzebub and a necessary adjustment by Patuman, who then benched the Kanto Marowak in favor of the Credilli, which, if you look
Yeah.
at Steelix, does Thunderfang damage. Lapras weak to both grass and rock. Moltres weak to rock. Credilli has a lot of great play into those 3, so Patu adjusted. Led Corsola into Lapras, had Lapras and Credilli in the bag for Steelix and Moltres, and won game 2 thanks to Lapras energy in the end because I think he farmed down the Lapras exactly
Mm-hmm.
in the Lapras mirror match, exited with, so exactly meaning at the very second or half second the Lapras got to a sparkling area. Very, very precise gameplay there to exit with 2 sparkling arias to unleash against a healthy but shieldless Steelix to take the second game in favor of Pato.
Yeah.
Then Pato does something that I didn't expect, and I think I had reason to not expect it because not only does he go double weak to the Galarian Moltres, but he does so in an ABA fashion. And not only does he do that in an ABA fashion, he also leads the Kanto Marowak into the Lapras. So
Yeah.
again, it doesn't find the Steelix. It's very good at RPSing the Steelix, and the energy would go places. But yeah, right now he's just again in a really tough spot because he has to kind of get his Marowak away from the Lapras,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully bait out the Steelix, but unfortunately the Golisopod that he did bring doesn't have the greatest play into either of the 3. Like the
Agreed.
Golisopod is useful if you get it aligned against the Annihilate. It is useful if you expect the Kwag or the Tinkaton, but the Kwag or the Tinkaton just didn't ever come for Beelzebub.
Yep.
So the Golisopod was essentially useless. It had like neutral play into Lapras still, but it never really got alignment, and it was a tough bring. And yeah, it came out twice in the grand finals. It lost both games, and Beelzebub even managed to call the Bone Club bait when he didn't even need to. He was
That was
so far
crazy.
ahead, called the Bone Club regardless. And yeah,
Yeah.
just really, really took it based on Pato apparently making a little bit of a line call that didn't go his way. And the last match before the reset was a little curious because we see the Lapras mirror and we find out new information, which is that Pato's Lapras actually wins charge attack priority. So the way you would expect this matchup to go then is for Pato to just throw the last Sparkling Aria on charge attack priority and take switch advantage to then align the Corsola to whatever isn't the Moltres and the Fortress that he had in the back to the Moltres to bug bite it down, to wear it down with the Rock Tombs or Sand Tombs. But what happens is actually a little bit of a curious play where I don't know whether Pato intended to lose swap or whether he just anticipated maybe a catch, even though nothing really tanks the Sparkling Area better than the Lapras that was already in the matchup, where he doesn't actually fire off the last Sparkling Aria even though he had it available.
I noticed that.
And yeah, that essentially led to Beelzebub taking switch advantage and dictating the outcome of the match from there. So that was the first half of the grand finals. What we now see is the bracket reset. Beelzebub has the momentum on his side. Pato needs to adjust. He has tried essentially. Has he tried every Pokemon on his team yet? He did try the Pod. He did try the Lapras. He did try the Corsola. He did try the Fortress. He did try the Kwag. He did try the Credilli. All 6 Pokemon already came out, and it's only been 4 games that have been played. So what worked for Pato? The Corsola Lapras Dilly team worked the best. So he brings this. He brings the Dilly back first, but he does pair it again with the Fortress because if you run Dilly Fortress core, you are in a good spot against the Moltres because you have both a decent matchup in the front and in the back. You would get punished by the Annihilate, but Pato knows that Beelzebub has learned from the winners finals and has benched the Annihilate. So what happens in the first match of the reset is actually something fairly curious because it starts off with a Credilli into Steelix matchup with Fortress Corsola and Lapras Moltres in the back. And the first move that is thrown is just a straight Rock Tomb from Pato's side. Maybe assuming that 2 Grass Knots with the double resisted acid damage or triple resisted even, may not knock out the Steelix. Therefore opting for that little bit of chip that will also help mitigate the effects of the Psychic Fangs that will be coming his way. The fancy play that is that okay, let me check this actually. Is this already the game where this is okay. It was the last sentence, even though it happens in the last sentence of my notes, even though it happens early in the game, where Beelzebub actually catches a Grass Knot from the Credilli on his Galarian Moltres, which is insanity, because if Pato doesn't throw there, he will have 2 Rock Tombs ready for that Galarian Moltres. So he catches the Grass move, then shields up the Rock Tomb, managed to do some Switch Timer shenanigans, and yeah, the end game essentially ends up with the Steelix, which is really kind of unchecked outside of the Credilli, which at that point is just really, really low. Having so much energy that it just munches through the Corsola. You see Pato shaking his head after apparently miscounting and letting a crunch go.
That was the backbreaker.
At that point, you wonder, is he able to come back from this? And honestly, the fact that after losing 1-3 in the first set, they're going down 0-1 in the second set, that Pato still comes back and ties up the series to a 2-2 later on, I think that is so impressive, honestly. Because at this moment, I was wondering whether he would have the mental fortitude to really make the comeback.
Potsman really turned
Yeah.
a corner mentally, emotionally this season. I feel like this is similar to what Out of Pocket did last year when he won NAIC. For some reason, younger trainers they really wear their emotions on their sleeve a lot of the time, and Potaman and Pocket both just made leaps and bounds in terms of maintaining their mental strength, especially through losers bracket runs and after taking hard losses. So I agree with you. Seeing Potaman bounce back was actually very impressive. And this whole obviously, I want you to finish the breakdown because I find this super fascinating. But this whole series, I didn't realize at first how much this was colored by that winners finals matchup that they had before, and how the specter of Shadow Annihilate basically towered over every decision that Potaman made in this grand finals. But please continue.
And I think that after going ABA to Annihilate, we are
Mm-hmm.
in game two of the bracket reset.
Yes.
Boy already 1-0 up. And now Pato feels as if he needs to account for that Shadow Annihilate at least to a degree again. So this time he runs an ABB strategy with the Galarian Corsola in the lead, with the Lapras and the Credillia in the back. Essentially his
Hmm.
three strongest, most neutrally potent Pokemon. Um, and I think this is one of my favorite plays, and one
Yeah.
that will echo in the decisive game 5 as well, where there's Corsola into Lapras. Eventually, there's the Moltres pivot. This is one thing that I did point out to you before, where I'm
Yes.
always really impressed by if there's Lapras into Corsola lead, Beelzebub doesn't pivot immediately. It does like two psi waves or five psi waves, so that the
Mm-hmm.
moment he pivots out is the exact moment when Pato starts a whole new Astonish. So essentially giving the Moltres that switches in one extra turn of energy advantage compared to when you take the turn, like, and essentially come in one turn after the Astonish started. So by doing this amount of sideways, by taking this amount of turns doing fast attacks first, you lock your opponent into um, a fast move and give yourself a slight energy head start. And this
Exactly.
allows the Moltres to essentially keep pace with the Credilli counter swap. It allows it to bait flies to threaten Brave Birds. Um, and yeah, like we end up in a position where the players essentially trade shields, but not only did they trade shields, Pato also managed to debuff the Moltres twice by throwing rock tombs at it. And at this point, the timer is back up. And what Pato does is incredibly smart because he knows the Moltres is very, very debuffed. It's not a big threat anymore. He can pivot into the Corsola again, which used to be the matchup that the Moltres wanted to be in. But at
Yep.
this point, the Moltres is in power gem range. It's very debuffed. And the Corsola already has a little bit of energy. So Corsola actually paces to the knockout blow, takes down the Moltres, and essentially sets Pato up for a game two victory, and kind of helps to swing the pendulum a little bit back into his favor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a game that was really masterfully played from both trainers, but with the better and the better strategy at that point from Pato. Um, but then we see another instance of do not bring the Golai support. The Golai support does not have play because again, Pato knows the Annihilate will come eventually. This time he goes
Yeah.
for another ABB, but this time the bees are what the bees. The bees are what's strong against the Annihilate, whereas the lead Pokemon, is the Credilli. And the
Yes.
Credilli stares down the Annihilate. It is back after 6 games of not coming out. The Shadow
Exactly.
Ape hits the field again, finds its target, and yeah, at that point, I feel as if that's just like another dismantling of the Shadow Claw Goliath support, which is so strong if it
Yeah.
has to counter a Pokemon like Dusclops, but has a very pitiful matchup against a Pokemon like Moltres, where the Shadow Claw is resisted rather than neutral Fury Cutters, which
Yeah.
actually are able to flip that matchup in the 1 and 2 shot scenario. Um, so really getting exposed on the counter swap there. And also shout out to Beelzebub for the end game where he did use an ice beam where other people may have used the sparkling aria. yeah, it's essentially kind of just downhill from there. I think it's a fairly comfortable win. Even the Lapras is even getting the honor of taking down the Dilly with an Ice Beam. So
Yeah.
yeah, like the pod play has not really been working out, and it's
Yeah.
no different in this game. But again, Pato does bounce back, and he goes back to what worked before, bringing the Corsola Lapras Dilly, which is just his safest line. And now staring down a familiar foe in Steelix Lapras Moltres, again benching the Annihilate, potentially scared of a Corsola alignment, maybe a little confused that the pod is coming out time and time again. And yeah, Beelzebub is trying to avoid that matchup. So this matchup is an interesting one as well because like halfway through it, it almost looks as if Beelzebub is in a position to win. It looks like it may all be over already.
Agreed.
Because after the Corsola Steelix matchup plays out and gives Pato the initial switch advantage, he hard pivots into the Lapras.
Yep.
And that allows so the reason why Pato does that is because of the Annihilate, right? Because if you don't save that little bit of Corsola that you do have left, you just run risk of getting completely demolished by a 2-shield Annihilate in the back. So you pivot Lapras, but what comes in is not there is no Annihilate. There's just the Galarian Moltres doing like 6 sucker punches. And then what comes in is the Lapras from Beelzebub tanking all the energy. But the switch timers are a little misaligned. And Pato manages to not only stall the clock a little bit, but also tank a lot of Lapras energy on his own Lapras, and then make the catch on the low health Corsola to deny essentially stall the switch clock further and also deny Beelzebub's Lapras a little bit of its own energy going somewhere useful. So that is really pivotal in this matchup because now Pato still has a healthy enough Lapras, manages to save that and manages to save a ton of energy. So yeah, the Corsola is gone, the Moltres farms down, stares down the Credilli in the final matchup, but because the shields are still in play, and even though the Moltres has enough energy for a Brave Bird, Pato just calls the fly immediately, doesn't have to shield, and then manages to just trade shields until the Lapras is in a position where it just can take out everything that's left over because it has so much energy stored. So that was really essentially won on that catch. He may have been able to win it on alignment, but I think this was the more exciting way for that match to go down. And yeah, it leads us into the decisive game 5 on a 2-2. And this is the game where I say, okay, this is informed by game 2 that we already talked about. That was the one where Pato hard swapped the Corsola back after trading shields with the Credilli against the Moltres. We have the same lines. We have Corsola, Lapras, Credilli into Lapras, Moltres, Steelix.
Yep.
And it plays out similarly in that Beelzebub again attempts to swap out at a moment in time when it's like a little desync and he gets the exact right amount of energy to threaten the Credilli with the Moltres. And again, Pato does switch back out into the Galarian Corsola. But this time, this is so interesting because both trainers adjust. Pato doesn't throw the Power Gem, whereas Beelzebub tries to catch the potential Power Gem on his Steelix in the back. Pato anticipates that, but the problem is the Steelix pivot still wins the game for Beelzebub because now he gets to neutralize a lot of the Corsola and the Corsola's energy, and the end game just ends up fairly unfortunate for Patoman because he instantly pivots into his own Lapras with a low health, like a yellow health, debuffed Galarian Corsola on his side and a Power Gem loaded. And like the moment Beelzebub reveals his own Lapras, Pato just goes into the mirror. that means that later in this matchup, he will not be able to get the power gem off because the Corsola just loses CMP to everything. And it also means that he hardlocks himself into the switch again, where he is not able to catch on his low health Credilli in the back. I feel as if the only way to pull that game back for Partoman at that point in time would have been to throw the power gem at the exact right moment of overfarm, essentially, so
Hmm.
that you would have at least like a little bit of residual health to threaten the um Moltres that would come in, and then just let the Corsola go down eventually to then have the opportunity to catch a Brave Bird from the Moltres on your Credilli, which is like you would have to catch at a random time, but your opponent can also not wait for you to be within a fast attack, like within the animation, because you're a Psywave on your own Lapras. You would have to deny the Brave Bird damage on the Lapras, and you would need to have your switch available for that. So you couldn't have a hard pivot there.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was a very difficult situation for Pato to maneuver out of. And yeah, it was great learning, great adaptability from both players. But yeah, it just ended up swinging into Beelzebub's direction because, um, yeah, like the Pokemon that he had at his disposal were just better suited for the opportunity at the end of the day. And if you have
Hmm.
two giants, two like essentially flawless Pokemon Go PvP players, going at each other, sometimes a little bit of a comp advantage can make the difference. And yeah, it
Hmm.
was still, I think it was just about the best showcase of Pokemon Go PvP we could have wished for, because we got to spend so much time with the players, with their teams, with their strategies. We got to see all six Pokemon on Pato's team. We got to see them adapt. Um, we got to see the stage design, and it was like really like an hour worth of Pokemon Go themed entertainment that really made a great case for the game. And honestly, even though like I didn't have like much of a horse in the race, but if I could have chosen an opponent, like a champion, I probably would have went with Pato because the two of us have a little bit of a history. Still
Yeah,
very happy for Beelzebub, but I was going to be happy regardless,
me
just
too.
because this was such a great showing, and I think you couldn't have sold the game of Pokemon Go PvP much better than we did.
So much nuance, so many intricate details. I especially really admire what you pointed out about Beelzebub's timing on the swaps, especially in the lead situation against a Galarian Corsola. I watched back the grand finals as you were talking. I went to game 5 and I watched it, just to kind of refresh my memory. He timed that swap in game 5 so perfectly that he got 2 sucker punches on that Galarian Moltres before the Galarian Corsola could pivot out because, it kind of like dives forward when it does the Astonish. And because of the way he timed his side waves before the swap, just as you said, he was able to get that energy lead, which allowed him to tie with that Cradily over and over again. So just these small like finesse plays are so microscopic that unless you're a top 5% player, you probably don't even see it coming, unless you're explicitly told about it. Something I wanted to point out is that if you look at the general sims, the Sparkling Aria from Lapras is going to do about 29% damage to your stock Galarian Corsola, whereas the Ice Beam does 33%. I still think if you look at the margins here, it's extremely close. But I still think if this was a high rank Galarian Corsola, a low attack Lapras, in those final moments, if Pato would have brought out the Cradilly to soak the Ice Beam from the Lapras, because Beelzebub blind fires that Ice Beam. He's already tapping the button when that Galarian Corsola comes out. I almost feel like if you would have thrown Ice Beam into Cradilly, KO'd it, and then only had the Sparkling Aria for the Galarian Corsola with a loaded Power Gem, there was still a slight win condition. I mean,
Oh,
I'm talking like 1 or 2 HP because Beelzebub did have the double up on the Sparkling Aria, but obviously you can't double up on Ice Beam, right?
how
So
healthy was the Lapras at that point?
I think the Lapras was within Power Gem range, if I'm being honest.
Oh,
I think it could have likely KO'd. Let me see if I can get the timestamp. Power Gem into the Lapras is going to do well. It was about half health. Power Gem does 43%, so maybe the Lapras would have survived. I think that's a very valid point. But I just wanted to emphasize how close this series
Yes,
really was, because
he
either
likely
Lapras
would have.
wins.
He likely would have gotten an astonished too, right? Because like Beelzebub would have had to try and farm up a little.
Yeah. So either Lapras wins with 50% health or it wins with 7% health. But either way, this matchup is very, very close between these two. So I alluded to Shadow Annihilate being like a specter over this entire series. I noticed a couple things when you were recapping these battles. The only games that Potoman won, he won 3 games in the series. The only games he actually won were teams that were ABB weak to that Shadow Annihilate. And it was the same trio every time: Galarian Corsola,
Yes.
Lapras, and Cradily, which you mentioned. And then in in game five, the decisive game five of the bracket reset, this was actually a repeat of what we saw in game two of the initial grand finals and game two of the reset. Same trios, same lineups, same leads. But this time, Beelzebub actually made the adjustments and was able to win against that team that had been beating him. So again, we talk about like margins of victory and how narrow this was. This was the trio that Potaman was winning with every time he won. And he took it into Beelzebub, who had lost to it twice already in this grand finals. And Beelzebub made those micro adjustments that you mentioned and flipped this outcome. So again,
This is a this is a
if
little bit of a curveball, but this reminds me of a video that I saw recently from another person that was in a world's finalist shoes in Yokohama actually. Rubik's
mm,
Master, who was our runner-up in 2023, like kind of fallen out of love with the game,
yeah,
but always
you
like
could say that.
packaging that as a little bit of an argument. And one thing that he did mention in a recent video was how Pokemon Go PvP tends to feel formulaic after a while because if you encounter a team, you just go through the same motions every time. And I feel like this grand finals disproved that.
Yeah.
I think that it's just like an ever evolving back and forth of strategies, and I think that's why Pokemon Go PvP is still so intriguing to me even after all those years.
Yeah, not quite solved, right? Not quite, but close, but close. You mentioned something else that I found fascinating. This was brought up by our EU casting team as well, being Martine and Tomahawk. The Golisopod, right? We saw it in game three of the initial grand finals. We saw it again in game three of the reset. Both times it completely fizzled out. This is fascinating because we saw that Annihilate really be hammered by Beelzebub in the winners finals, bringing it over and over and over again. It kind of built up this expectation for Potaman to expect it. So he wanted to go like, he wanted to have a strong answer to Annihilate. You couldn't be too weak to it, but you also needed to kind of straddle other matchups. But he had another bug on his team that does way better against Galarian Moltres and Lapras, that being the Fortress. But if you do bring Fortress, you leave yourself exposed to Shadow Annihilate, which is such a fascinating thing to see that Beelzebub only brought it in game seven out of this entire 9 game series. So
Yes.
Shadow Annihilate, I mean, it wasn't on stage very much, but its shadow literally loomed over every single team decision that Potaman made in this grand finals. It's
Yeah.
staggering.
It was fantastic bench pressure at least, and well,
Yes,
the one time it did come out, it did find its target as well. So you just have to
exactly.
be like really meticulous about when you pull that ace off your sleeve. And
I'm telling you, you look at some of these teams, like for example, game three of the initial grand finals. That was Shadow Kanto Marowak, Lapras Glisopod up against Lapras, Shadow Steelix, Galarian Moltres. Wouldn't you rather have the Rock Tomb, Sand Tomb Fortress, Rock Tombing Lapras, Sand Tombing Steelix, Rock Tombing Galarian Moltres? Wouldn't you rather have that than a Shadow Claw Cradily, or excuse me, Shadow Claw Glisopod that gets annihilated by Moltres? It gets Thunderfanged by Steelix and it's neutral against Lapras. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah,
staggering.
five out of those 9 matchups, Beelzebub went ABA weak to Fortress. It's like I know like you're the Fortress guy number one, but maybe it would have been a decent play at times. I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
don't
was
know.
like, simply, I feel as if Pato leaning into Dilly, Corsola, and Lapras, that did
Mm-hmm.
make the most sense to me,
Yeah,
personally, just
agreed.
because of the neutral play. But yeah, I feel like there was a little bit of Fortress disrespect going on, maybe trusting the scarecrow that is Shadow Annihilate to keep that on the bench.
I think Beelzebub was just willing to take a few more risks, if I'm being honest. Calling the Bone Club bait against the Shadow Kanto Marowak, swapping to catch a Grass Knot against a doubled up Cradilly. I mean, just insane decisions, right?
Yeah,
But he just was in a flow state, and yeah, definitely deserved to win because honestly, if you have the guts to make those kinds of bets in the grand finals, then you have something going for you. So yeah, like you said, best showcase I think we could have asked for competitive Pokemon Go. We love the bracket resets. It's tough on the trainers. I'm sure Potaman would have preferred to just win it outright, but for viewers' perspective, they put on one hell of a show, and I hope that they're both extremely proud of what they accomplished at Worlds. And
100%.
also, I hope that it fuels Potaman a bit more. I hope that he says, I was in 3 Sundays in one season, but I didn't win Worlds, so I have
Yeah,
more to prove. So I'm going to go full speed ahead in 2026.
yeah.
That's what I
Like
really hope to see.
I'm legit a little scared that he's just going to take every tournament he enters now because I don't know, like obviously it's small margins and
Mhm.
um it's not as if any player is unbeatable, but like this also, like these grand finals also did show that this is a young people's game. I'm 31 years old. I don't know for how much longer I'll be able to like go up against the Potomans and Beelzebubs and really have a shot.
And
Like
the
this is obviously
Yokais.
like exactly. This is like kind of tongue in cheek a little bit because I don't believe that like with the um half second turns, this is not as dependent on having a young person's brain as maybe some of the first person shooter games are.
Yeah,
I guess you can have a decent amount of longevity in this game, but you see those up and coming trainers, those trainers that are like in their teens or early 20s. And if we look at people like Wolf Glick at VGC, like those came up at
mm,
around that age. Where will those trainers that we see in Go now be in 10 years? If this is really
true.
supposed to be a forever game, if this is really going to stay part of the series. And right now, it feels as if competitive Pokemon is only growing. So it must
Mm.
be a great time to be like 20-ish years old and one of the best in the world because you may be able to build a sizable legacy for yourself. And who's in a better position for that than Potoman at this point?
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is something that King said like years ago. He mentioned this. He said that Pokemon Go is a young person's game. And back then I was like, that's just King being, tongue in cheek or maybe speaking to his own retirement ambitions and that kind of stuff. But I do think there is something to be said about the young trainers that have just such fast reaction times and are just on top of their game and are able to enter this flow state just basically at will, just whenever they feel like it. So what an incredible grand finals. I'm going to throw up a video on the YouTube version as well. If you didn't watch the actual tournament itself, ZZ just basically gave you a S tier radio station play by play of exactly what happened in the grand finals. So you can picture all of it. He is a artist with words. So but if you want to watch the video, I will throw up the Sunday Arena video here as we talk about this. Moving into closing ceremonies, I really felt like this is a step change in how competitive Pokemon is going to be moving forward. It was so funny from a production standpoint. I think it's fine if I say this publicly. We as casters did not see the Sunday venue all weekend. We only saw it when we literally walked in on Sunday morning. And a big reason for that secrecy is that this was like a trial run. This was a first time. This was, hey guys, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to do our best and hopefully it turns out, but we don't know. And this is very ambitious and we don't want to make any big promises and let you down. So we're just going to work on it, heads down, work on it really hard, get the venue ready to go, and then just see what happens. But for me, this was almost like, yeah, you pick the last player in dodgeball, and then that player turns out to be your MVP. They're like incredible, right? Just winning every point, just playing out of their minds. This felt like a home run on a first attempt, is what I'm trying to get across. Um, I honestly thought the venue was incredible. The LED floorboards lighting up with each game, Unite, Go, TCG, VG, I've heard comparisons to Yu-Gi-Oh, where Yu-Gi-Oh needs to bring on like the actual 3D sprites of the monsters in order to compete with what Pokemon is doing. And I mean, this is just phenomenal. And then you look forward
Yeah.
to 2026 and you look at the Chase Center, which was in the advertised trailer for Worlds, and you look at the capacity and you say, oh my God, the Chase Center can hold 18,000 people. There were only about 5,000 people in Anaheim. So
Oh man,
it's going to get big.
this is going to be massive, especially because this is
Massive.
accompanied by like a a greater Pokemon event surrounding the World Championships this time around.
Hmm.
And yeah, like they start selling tickets for that like in a month from now already. So
Yeah.
it's they're really moving at a really fast pace,
Yeah.
and we get to be a part of that. So
Hmm.
this is something that even just as somebody who was like a day two competitor and then spectated day three, I was just really very grateful for that we can all be like just do our part in growing a game that has a stage like this that really feels if it is treated by the largest entertainment franchise in the world essentially as if it was the serious esports that it's growing into right now. And there's still problems obviously, be it
Yeah.
game performance issues or like there's always going to be hiccups here and there, right? But I still think that we've come such a long way, and the trajectory in terms of the championship series is something that makes me really, really hopeful, really, really optimistic for the future. And one thing that I also want to mention is the Eternatus event that
Yes.
happened right at the end of Championship Sunday, which I was a little bit upset about because I was already on my way home because Pokemon Go is like early in the morning, right? Like if
Yeah.
you don't really have to be there, like you don't necessarily need to stay all the way through, especially if there's like the next work week is going to start. It's like a 9 hour time zone difference.
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
to head home eventually. So I did have my flight booked for that evening, and I was at LAX when I found out that Eternatus is going to essentially appear at the venue. And I was like, why are you doing it now? Why don't you do that like at the end of Saturday when all the Go players are still around? But then I saw some people posting their experience from the venue. And we don't have to talk about like how we felt that the whole alternatives thing may have been closer to a cash grab, as some people have mentioned.
Mm, maybe.
Um, but just this moment there for the people that were still in attendance, I don't even think the Go players were the target audience. The
No.
target audience were Pokemon fans that maybe also had Pokemon Go installed on their phone and were now part of the action. They were actively participating when previously they were just like watching with whatever interest they may have had. But all of a sudden, you bring this action, you bring this community, you bring the 2016 feeling back to the people, back to the Pokemon fans. And I think even though it was just Anaheim, it was like relatively small scale. They maybe invested in other competitive games already and may not cross over to Go. But still, I think the way this was targeted at people, it did make sense. I feel like that did work. And I can see a world in which Pokemon Go will receive another push, especially with the anniversaries coming up next year. And I do believe that even though we've been going on about, oh, like NA is growing, EU is shrinking, but UIC is growing, but NAIC is not always selling out. We're like kind of like treading water at an acceptable level, but I
Hmm.
think there's going to be much more in store for us going forward. If we quote unquote, it's not you and me, it's just Pokemon Go
Yeah.
as a game. If they play their cards right, I think there's still so much potential.
This is something I want everyone to understand. So our show, right? We've done 34 episodes. This will be our 35th episode, which I do think is really really great. Most podcasts don't get past like 5 or 6 episodes, statistically speaking. So I love doing the show. I absolutely adore everyone who listens. I'm just going to be transparent. Our total number of listens, according to the platform that we publish on, is 5.8 thousand, which is awesome. Almost 6,000 listens. That's huge, right? I'm very, very proud of that. I'm very, very happy that everyone listens to it and enjoys it so much. The point I want to get across is exactly what ZZ is alluding to, is that competitive Pokemon as a percentage of the overall player base is still exceedingly small, especially when it comes to Pokemon Go. And I think that a lot of our mission, and I learned this at GoFest We learned this. It was basically reinforced with this Eternatus event, is that we have to widen the funnel and we have to speak more to the casual players and let them know that this is even an option. I mean, I've heard rumors that even when you talk to the Pokemon company, employees that work for the Pokemon company don't know that there are regional tournaments. They don't know that there's a championship series. And then you look at the broader Pokemon Go community and you say, oh, well, I know Eternatus is a thing. And wait, it was actually debuted at Worlds? Oh, that's really exciting. Let me see what Worlds is about. You talk about GoFest and you're like, oh, we actually had a GoFest stream? Oh, that's awesome. Oh, they were giving away drops that actually might help me in PvP. Wait, the commentators work on the championship series. Let's look at that, right? We have to widen this funnel and bring more people into this community, because I feel like while our viewership is awesome and I'm so grateful for everyone that's been listening, I think everyone would want to see interest, viewership, participation. I think everyone wants to see the numbers go up, right? I think that's totally fair. And if we're ever going to get to that point, we need to bring in more casual players. So, like you said, Eternatus was not really targeted at the hardcore PvP Go players that were there. Many of them take pride in not raiding unless they need charge TMs, to be fair. This was targeted at all those Pokemon fans that were there in Anaheim that have Pokemon Go on their phone, which I got to be honest with you, is a majority of the people there. It was targeted at all of them, and they were saying, "Hey, you're here at Worlds. Maybe your son is playing TCG, or maybe you got knocked out of the video game championship, but you have Pokemon Go, and there's this big event you can get into, and it's at Worlds." So this is like encouragement for people to open the app again, uh, explore the new features in the game, and maybe get into PvP, trying to widen the funnel yet again. So I know that competitive Pokemon Go PvP and casual players, we've had our differences and we don't always agree with each other. For example, there were a lot of comments on the post I made about the new level 80 update that I simply don't agree with. I think the opinions are bad, but at the same time, I have to respect them because they are Pokemon Go players. They do care about the game enough to take time out of their day to write these responses. So yeah, everybody, we need to widen the funnel. We need to accept more casual players and we need to shepherd them into the competitive scene. And things like Eternatus, you nailed it, Swireless. Those are for the casual players, and their proximity to Worlds is something that is really going to help us grow, and we need to embrace it. Full stop.
Yes. I'm
That's
really like between level 80, I'm really curious to see, like, the next year is going to be so pivotal, I feel, because of the anniversaries and because of the way that can really propel a game like Pokemon Go to new heights.
Yes.
And I feel like the first steps have been undertaken. So yeah, I'll continue to be along for the ride for the most part. Going to all the events, and yeah,
All of them. Hold on. Breaking news.
not not quite all of them,
Every
but
regional championship Z's Wireless will be there. So you need to
I
be
will
there
be
too, everybody.
attending 5 regional championships or
Whoa!
international championships before December. So that's going to
What?
be plenty.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I do think that is plenty. Please line up for autographs. We need to fund this show somehow. So
Oh god, I
20
don't
bucks an
know what the
autograph.
going rate for those is. Yeah, $20 sounds about right.
Well, honestly, I felt like this change to the arena, whenever you undergo change, it's slightly uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable, categorically speaking. If you People will say if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not growing, right? It was different going into a different it was different going to a different it was strange and unique going into a adjacent arena that was different from the main venue hall, but I just hope that everyone is comfortable doing that, because I think that for 2026 you're going to have to be even more committed, because when you look just on the map, right, it's not a secret. If you look on the map, you look at the Chase Center and you look at the actual convention hall in San Francisco, and they're pretty far apart. And I know there's a lot to do at Worlds, but you might have to commit to one or the other on Sunday. If you want to watch the grand finals, you're going to have to take an Uber, ride share, whatever, over to the Chase Center to see it. It's not going to be as easy as it was in Anaheim, where you just walk into the next hall and suddenly you're in the arena. So yeah, I hope everyone's ready for the additional commitment, but also the additional hype, right? It's going to be great.
Yeah. Like, one thing,
But
it's just like a small side note, but I
yeah,
wonder whether the a new idea of always having Championship Sunday in an arena, that may limit the cities that are going to be hosting worlds in the future, because you will need to have the infrastructure for that too, not just a regular old convention center. So
Correct.
yeah, it's only going to get bigger and better.
Until Pokemon
Hopefully.
builds their own arena and moves it from city to
Like
city.
they're building a theme park in Japan. Like there's things happening currently.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm excited to see what this Pokemon XP debut is about, because that's
Oh
also
yeah,
new. So
it is. It
we'll
is.
see. Well, ZZ, we covered a lot. We covered the meta. We covered a lot of player storylines. We talked about grand finals extensively. Again, if you miss anything about that, go back, listen to ZZ's recap, because it was honestly point for point, step for step, exactly what happened. We talked about the closing ceremonies. We recapped our own predictions that we made and how they actually came to fruition. And I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to discuss before we sign off.
I think we are pretty much done with what we wanted to talk about today, but there's still so much that we do want to talk about in our next
Mm.
episode, which is the entirety of the Tales of Transformation season that is awaiting us, the move updates, be it move reworks, new moves being distributed, the overall picture that the meta will paint, or even just the 2026 season of the Championship Series, because there are some news, there are some minor changes here and there. And honestly, the next regional events are already around the corner. It's like 3 weeks ish. So,
Less,
but
even less than that.
I'm
Also, I
honestly here for it. I feel like I've just come out of my summer slump where I've been really busy with my day job, and now I get to actually spend the next 4 months focusing on the Pokemon part of my life a little more.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll be at Frankfurt, I'll be at Pittsburgh, I'll be at Gdansk, I'll be at LAIC, and I will be at Stuttgart.
Wow, what a slate of tournaments. Watch out for ZZ, grab his autograph when you can. We always really, really appreciate it when folks walk up to us and tell us they listen to the show and they enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. And ZZ, I finally figured out why Empoleon is so high on the projected rankings. This is, again,
Why is that?
pre transparency. We don't know exactly what the energy values are. I think it's because of the drill peck buff on Empoleon, because it went from 65 damage to 70 damage, and it gets Metal Sound, which I think is a slight upgrade from Metal Claw and Waterfall. So maybe
Yes,
that's what Cocoon is looking at.
the Metal
Maybe.
Sound pacing is what makes it so great, because it's 10 turns to every move, and that is just, well, it's like kind of the gold standard, especially if your moves are buff Drill Peck and Stab Hydro Cannon.
Exactly. So get ready for some flying types. Maybe some peckers are going to be in the new meta. We're going to find out. Azizi, it's been an honor and a pleasure, and we promised you a short
Yes.
episode, but we kind of got carried away with the hype. I can't wait to talk with you about the new move sets or the new move
Yes,
set
yes.
updates once we
I've
figure out
yet
the
to
energy
find
values.
somebody to complain about a long episode, so we're probably in the clear.
I think so too. I think we actually get more compliments when they're longer episodes, which is not what I expected, but we're very, very grateful. So, all right, ZZ, it's been fun. Get some more rest. Got to get back to regular human life, and see you at every single event this season, is what I've heard.
Yes, yes, every single event, especially when there's like three on the same day, like Birmingham, Auckland, and Merida. I'll be at all of them. Watch me.
I mean,
PvP Steve is nothing against me.
you're going to have to. How are you going to do this? You're going to have to compete in Championship Sunday in Monterey, and then fly back over to Frankfurt. No, you'll do Frankfurt first, I think. Yeah, Frankfurt first, and then fly over to Monterey to win that tournament as well, because they're on the same weekend. So
I feel like the Z's Wireless just has to evolve into a Hydreigon, and then every head has to attend its own regional. I think that's how it's done.
yeah, Aziz Wireless learned fly, and he flew into the event. But
Oh,
it's been fun, my friend. Only a few days until the next season starts, so let's get some rest. Let's think about this moveset update, and tons of more Show Six content is on the way. So stay tuned. Bye, everybody.
till next time.